In the Newscast studio. And then
Laura in the Newscast studio with you.
And Paddy in the Newscast studio opposite the both of you.
Yes,
in the side-eye chair.
Yeah, I call this the side-eye chair because I feel if I sit in this seat and I'm speaking to that person on my right, I have to sort of do a bit of side-eye.
Well, I now feel like I'm getting a job interview, so be kind.
And we're waiting for Chris Mason to appear, and I think he's going to appear in a screen to my left, but we've sort of lost track of him. He is at Westminster, though, so he's not like in some random car park in a marginal seat, so he should be quite easy to get hold of at some point. So do you know what's interesting? So I've been doing this 6-hour-long newscast, like live marathon on BBC Sounds today, and you realise like all the timelines have diverged. So for people like Mel Stride, the Work and Pension Secretary, who we'll listen to in a second, he's basically saying the election's over. Then we broadcasters go, it's the last day of campaigning because on polling day itself, we're banned by law from saying anything. But then you speak to the actual candidates and the activists, and they're like, hang on, we're about to pull a 37-hour shift getting people to go to the polls. And you're like, it's all sort of, everyone sort of stops the election at a different time.
Yes, I mean, that's a fancy way of putting it. And it's interesting. There are these parallel universes going on, of course. And all of them are individually true, right? So if you are a senior politician in any party, like Mel Stride, you look at the big picture and you think, yes, the broad shape of what is going to happen appears to be crystal clear, short of some sort of asteroid landing from Earth and something very bizarre happening. Then you do have absolutely the candidates are about to put in an absolutely massive shift because, yes, every vote counts. Sometimes parliamentary majorities have been won by just 2 votes. So if you didn't knock on as many doors and then you lose by 2, well, you will be hacked off so that you went off for a cup of tea at 9:45 instead of carrying on.
Yeah.
But you're right, there is then, quite rightly, this legal requirement that as soon as the ballot boxes are open tomorrow morning, we all shut up. But it's curious, though, in a way, this campaign, because I cannot remember a senior politician on the morning of it saying publicly, basically, it's over. Privately, sure, that happens in campaigns. Always people go, oh, we think it's probably going to happen this way. But for senior politicians to overtly and openly say what's going to happen, I think it's extraordinary.
Can I raise my finger like this?
You just have.
And say,
If
is
you're
it for
lucky.
telling off?
No, but it looked like I was pointing at you, which would be very rude.
Rude.
Instead, I'm going to point. Can I take your Mel Stride and raise you Suella Braverman?
Yeah.
So you had Mel Stride on the radio saying it's going to be a massive Labour landslide.
Well, actually, should we listen? Because we've got it from the radio archives from like 10 hours ago. So let's have a little listen to what Mel Stride actually said, and then you can pick up with your Suella point.
I totally accept that where the polls are at the moment means that tomorrow is likely to see the largest Labour landslide majority, the largest majority that this country has ever seen, much bigger than 1997, bigger even than the national government in 1931. What therefore matters now is what kind of opposition do we have? What kind of ability to scrutinise government is there within Parliament?
So just to say that Mel Stride did not say that when the campaign started. He said there was an election was everything to play for, number one. Number two, I was just going to interject to say Suella Braverman took to the Daily Telegraph to say it's over. So it's 2 bookends of Tory greatness, grandidom.
What Mel Stride does not know, though, and he was saying sort of pretty categorically in a very public way, he doesn't know that it's going to be the biggest majority since time began. He doesn't know that at all. And if you talk to the parties privately, what they still will always say is, look, the range of outcomes is still very, very great. So on Newscast, we are not saying this is what is going to happen, but it is notable that a cabinet minister has said this is what's going to happen. And a cynic might wonder slightly if it was in part designed to say to people, oh, well, you don't actually need to go out and bother voting because this is what's going to happen anyway. And that's Labour's interpretation of it. Publicly, they claim it's voter suppression, which is a very strong charge to make.
Yeah. Chris Mason has materialised. Hello.
Hello, gang. Hello. Sorry, I got a little waylaid in conversation with the brilliant Alan Little. And so we ended up shooting the breeze in the corridor and I lost track of time. So sorry.
Was he writing a classic Alan Little sort of poem about this great moment in our island story, which he specialises in?
I think that's kind of the thrust of it. I think that is kind of the thrust of it. The last time I caught up with Alan, I discovered he ended up with a parking ticket. We talked for so long. So anyway, at least this time he should be spared that. But yeah, sorry.
Well, newscasters are going to give you a ticket for you just said you weren't off late because you were getting some story. You were just having a gossip with one of our colleagues.
Well, you know.
Goodness.
We're all human. going, aren't we? You know?
Blimey. Well, I know
Chris,
who comes first.
We're just discussing whether it's done and dusted and over or not, and why somebody might say it is, but other people might say it's not, and blah.
Well, my conversation with Alan Little or the election.
I don't know if he's still there with you.
So, I just put my headphones on and it was hearing the tail end of what Laura was saying there. You know, this is parties who are still in kind of campaigning mode, aren't they? Yes, of course they are reacting to the backdrop, the weather makers that are the opinion polls. Of course they are, and they have their own private polling, their own returns from the knocking on the doors and all that kind of stuff, all of the data that they have. But they're also still trying to shape the mood of those who might be tempted to vote for them. So it's all part of the kind of psychology of the last day, isn't it? Even though it is worth emphasising, it was still quite a thing to hear from a cabinet minister on the radio the day before a general election.
But has Mel Stride made himself unpopular with Conservative foot soldiers and Conservative candidates and other, recently Conservative MPs?
I mean, when you speak to Conservatives, they depending on which ones you speak to, they have a range of people who they might put up on their sort of league table of colleagues to be unpopular with. I think broadly speaking, given sort of Mel Stride's demeanour and usual careful selection of words, and indeed, you know, as he might see it, just articulating out loud what some of the opinion polls might suggest could happen, as opposed to, as Laura was saying, him saying that will happen or is going to happen. One or two might be sort of mildly peaked, but in the grand scheme of things, when, as Paddy was mentioning, they are certainly some of them none too pleased with Suella Braverman's contribution in the Daily Telegraph this morning. And then others, by the way, are saying, look, let's be realistic. In their view, they anticipate defeat and so are anticipating what comes next and leadership races and all that kind of stuff. If indeed the Conservatives do lose, it kind of all gets swept up into that kind of noise, plenty of which we've seen quite a lot of in the last few weeks, going all the way back to Grant Shapps and that Times Radio interview when he first used that phrase or that word, supermajority.
So I've been spending some of my time telephoning people who are working for the parties today. And they're all working really hard. Some of them sound really sad. Some of them sound really tired. Some of them have children who've got a cold and they can't see them. And they're working really hard in a cause which they really believe in. Because I know it's unpopular to say that, because we're meant to believe that they're all the same. So, I don't. Sorry, write on Twitter that I'm awful. But these are people with a conscience who want to do well by our country. And they're working in a cause which they are completely and utterly believing in and feeling knackered.
But their leaders have just told them is a waste of time.
Well,
that's the thing I wonder about, actually. If you were a Tory candidate and you've heard that from Mel Stride and you've read that from Suella Braverman this morning, you are going to feel a bit hacked off. And it's something we often say at the weekends. We often say on the weekend newscast, because we're nice, right? That actually politicians and political activists and those people who give up their time or sometimes choose less lucrative, easier careers to go into politics, which is a tough old game. And everybody I've been talking to in the last few days have one thing in common. They're all absolutely shattered. Whether they think that they're about to walk into government or whether they think they're packing up their boxes and getting their P45, they are all knackered. There is a kind of little subplot, though, if you think about how Conservative cabinet ministers, and they're still ministers, even though they're not MPs at the moment, there is a real level of being hacked off among some of the ministers who've carried on doing media interviews, who've carried on turning up, compared to some of their colleagues who have, shall we say, been less willing to rush towards the microphone. Now, there's a combination of things there. I think there's an unwillingness, a genuine unwillingness for people not to come forward. And I think that the communications operation has had difficulty in finding people who would go and front up through some of the mishaps moments of this campaign. There is also the fact that some cabinet ministers who you might normally expect to see on the telly or on the wireless or on a podcast have been fighting for their seats and fighting to hang on to their job. But it's one of these little things you just go, oh, there's a little pebble in the pond that something's going to be cross and frustrated about after the election when this post-mortem if it lands that way, really comes.
There has been, quite a lot of well-known Conservatives turning up and doing just enough to say that they turned up. Think about Boris Johnson appearing the night before the last night to do a speech where he then doesn't even share the stage with Rishi Sunak.
Well, I know.
And he doesn't even say Rishi Sunak's name in his rally.
It was interesting that, because having not worked on that yesterday, sort of during the day, I just saw it on the news, like, most people heard it on the radio or saw the images on the news. And then when it was pointed out, as you did very clearly and very well on the 10 last night, Chris, that yes, they didn't appear on the stage and it had come about because there was a text message saying, please come and help. I think a lot of people just watching or reading about that online this morning just thought, what? This is like a pair of 6-year-olds who've sort of been made to shake hands and they wouldn't even do that. But it's okay. You can both have the sandpit, but you have a turn first and then the other little Johnny will have a go.
But what was weird is that obviously that was designed as like a last-minute surprise that is going to shake up and put some adrenaline in the Conservative campaign in the last 48 hours. But it sort of hasn't really landed like that. It sort of exploded a bit on social media last night. Yeah, Chris, you had to break the news like live on the 10 o'clock news. Oh, look who's back. But it hasn't like dominated the conversation today in a way that they presumably hoped or thought it might do.
So I wonder, Chris, do the in Tory HQ, do they think that would actually make a difference? Because we can pontificate. Surely we would never pontificate about what might have happened if he'd been very present during the campaign. But at this last minute moment, did they reckon it would make any difference?
I think it was sort of a bit more prosaic. He was up for doing it, so why not? And there he was, really, to be honest. And I mean, for me, kind of watching it, there it was. It's kind of 9:45, the sort of night before the last day. And there he suddenly was. And as you say, with that slightly odd choreography, that he comes on and does his thing and then disappears out of fire escape, and then the Prime Minister turns up. And of course, before that was Michael Gove, who's not running. So it's a slightly kind of odd choreography. And for me, just seeing Boris Johnson doing a very Boris Johnson-esque type stump speech with lots of gags, and the activists in the room loved it and were whooping and cheering and all the rest of it, to make the obvious point, but it's worth making, you're reminded about how politics has changed in 2019. Here is the guy making his first appearance on the campaign trail the day before the final day, 5 years on from being the guy who won this whopping majority for the Conservatives. And then and again, it is a statement of the obvious, but it was very striking last night, the oceans of difference, to put it, to understate it, in character and campaigning style between Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. All of the kind of exuberance that personified, Boris Johnson full stop, but particularly Boris Johnson back in 2019 on the campaign trail, as you well know, Laura, from following him and Jeremy Corbyn and others around then day by day, with the Rishi Sunak style, which is just completely and utterly different. Now, different people will have different views as to which of those two things they prefer, but my goodness, the difference was so stark. And to see it one after another at 10-10 last night kind of rammed home, that, yes, obvious point, but nonetheless striking one.
I think you've just put into one sort of thought bubble the whole problem for voters. We've had multiple prime ministers without a general election. Most voters, I was saying that the candidates are knackered. Most voters are knackered. Brenda in Bristol, I mean, she's never been heard from again, has she? After,
She does say when you phone her up, can you please leave me alone?
Yeah. So the thing is, the system works.
She says not another one, she means another journalist.
Yes, not another journalist. Not another BBC journalist. But the thing is, the system works. It's a parliamentary system. We can change the Prime Minister, get over it. That's the system we were bequeathed. But it's happened so many times that the voter wasn't used to it. So it already feels like we've been through a general election. Boris Johnson, of course, did go through it, 2019. Labour spanked, taken to places they'd never been taken to in their nightmare moments, simply in 2019. And now that we've got to go all out and go through this all over again. And I think, Chris, if I can just say, we're listening to you there saying the contrast of Boris and Rishi, guess what? That's his whole message, change. He said to us, I'm the change guy. And that's really difficult for voters to understand when you're in the same pod. You are two peas in a pod. And Rishi Sunak's trying to say, they're all chaotic. I'm the change guy.
That's absolutely right. And it's one of the things, if you look back at 2019, somebody in the Tory circles said to me, it was a heist. And the great heist that they pulled off was to give the public the impression that they were a new bunch of people. So it was a new leader, and it was a particular wing of the Tory party that was to the fore, but it was the Conservative Party. And at that point, it was going to be the third Conservative Prime Minister. And what they managed to do was create a sense that it was going to be a change and that they were a different outfit and that Boris Johnson was at the very least a different kind of Conservative. And to lots of people, he was just actually that guy with the one name and not necessarily connected to normal traditional party loyalties. But Rishi Sunak tried to sort of carry out that heist, if you want to use that phrase again, back in the autumn and say, hey, I'm the change guy. But actually, it appears that the weight of the record of 14 years has not been possible for him to get out under.
That kind of diminishing returns of reinvention. And then also Boris Johnson had built, hadn't he, very successfully in 2019, an improbably broad coalition of Conservative MPs, not just in number and that sizable majority, but in instinct as well. You know, those who were quite keen on an interventionist, quite big state, levelling up, pouring money into communities that perhaps have felt left behind and all of that. And then others, perhaps more on the whole, Southern English, as they would see it, traditional Conservatives who are sceptical about a big state. And then that single mission of delivering Brexit, and whatever you make of the Brexit project or Boris Johnson, he did deliver that thing that the previous parliaments have been unable to, which was to get it over the line, get the UK out of the European Union and set up a settlement with our nearest neighbours. And then the whole thing started crumbling, didn't it? I mean, not least because of Boris Johnson and Partygate and everything that came. And then, Paddy, as you say, of course, that extraordinary period of weeks in the autumn of 2022 with three prime ministers in a handful of months.
And of course, Labour loved the return of Boris Johnson, and they were joking, oh, what are we going to have at lunchtime? Liz Truss doing a press conference about economic stability. Ho, 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 ho. Then another thing Labour loved happened just after 3 o'clock when the Sun basically endorsed Labour, but in the weirdest way possible, in that they published a dummy front page on social media, which was a football-themed front page with a football stadium and a football jumping out, and then the big headline saying, it's time to change the manager, brackets, we don't mean Gareth Southgate, but not actually saying what the other person they were actually thinking about, and even what subject area of national life they were thinking about. And you have to turn to page 10 to get to the bit where they say, oh, we mean the general election, and we think the Tories should be booted out and replaced by Labour. But even then, once you read the editorial where they explain this, you have to get halfway down the column to actually pass the bit where they complain about the Tories and they complain about the Lib Dems and they talk up Nigel Farage, to actually get to the bit where they say, oh, we're endorsing Labour. So weird.
Well, I think it's exactly what we might have expected, because actually...
it's weird in terms of what you think for a classic newspaper endorsement of
although
a party.
I think the thing about you put something, it doesn't look like politics, it looks like football, people are more likely to click on it, right?
Also disguises what you're trying to do.
Sorry, I don't mean... Well, it does, but it keys into a... I mean, that I think is also... It's the absolute metaphor for them, right? Is it how English fans look at Southgate, and
particularly right
England
now
fans
as
who are
well.
so mean, terribly mean English fans. It's like your team doesn't do well, and then be mean about them instead of saying, "Come on, you can do better, chaps." But anyway, nobody's interested in what I think about football.
I was quite enjoying that.
But it's a sort of classic hedging, though, isn't it? But it's just this hedging, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like saying, because newspaper endorsements are still important, they're not nearly as important as they were a couple of decades ago.
But are they using Bellingham and Kane in the right way, Laura?
Well, I would suggest that because young Jude scored, I'm very worried about his gesture, though. That gesture
Can we
was
just
not,
stick to the point,
not,
please?
Sorry, yeah, we are live.
Take this offline, this
Yes.
football chat.
But I think it's sort of what we would have expected. And I think in a way, the Sun has... they've taken on what appears to be a common narrative that you hear actually from focus groups and pollsters. And actually, the Sun would always pride themselves on being very connected with their readers as well, saying actually the sentiment is that it is time for a different group of people to be in charge. But that is not because of kind of swooning for the Labour outfit. So they've kind of put them on notice, haven't they, in a way, that editorial.
And then, Chris, let's talk about some of the other parties who basically are sort of competing, according to the polls, with the Conservatives for a second and third place in the House of Commons chamber.
Yeah, so you got the Liberal Democrats and Ed Davey completing this sort of tour of kind of zany capers. So there was a load of ticker tape exploding on a bit of grass in Harpenden in Hertfordshire.
It's like a one-man PGL camp.
Yeah, as he rolls in the big yellow bus and then left. I don't quite know why, actually, but left in a pink in a pink car with Daisy
Cadillac.
Cooper. Yeah, the deputy leader. And I mean, the Lib Dems are pretty chipper. I spent a day following Ed Davey round the other day. They feel, I mean, to sort of cut to the chase of it, they feel that they can tap into what they think is a desire for change in places where there might be a desire to change from the Conservatives, but there isn't huge support for Labour. And, you know, primarily, as we've talked about on Newscast, that's in the southeast of England and the southwest of England, and there's a couple of pockets elsewhere in the north of England and in Scotland. But the main areas that they hope to gain are in the sort of southeast and the southwest. They're pretty keen and pretty confident, I think, of becoming the third biggest party in Westminster again, you know, which gives them that sort of slot at Prime Minister's questions and additional funding and that kind of stuff. If, as anticipated, the Scottish National Party slide back and therefore the Lib Dems and the Scottish National Party kind of swap places or cross over in terms of the number of the number of MPs.
And Chris, there was a classic line in your piece on the 6 o'clock news where John Swinney, the SNP leader and First Minister of Scotland, and your script line was, and John Swinney swept a pavement next to a plastic frog with a big mouth. I thought that is a script line that's like the Gettysburg.
It's one for the ages.
That was real poetry, wasn't it? I mean, they say that in television you've got to write to the picture, and if you've got John Swinney crouched down, he was toasting a marshmallow, actually.
Oh, yes, toasting a marshmallow, sorry.
Next to what looked like a shipping container, but I wasn't certain it was that, and right in front of the shipping container, and impossible not to mention, because I just thought anyone watching would just see this giant plastic frog. I think it was a bin, but I couldn't be certain it was a bin, so I didn't describe it as a bin in case I was mislabeling said plastic amphibian. Is it amphibian or a reptile? Amphibian.
Well, obviously reflects their fears that the Lib Dems will leapfrog them into be the third party.
I was going to make
in the
that
Commons.
gag, but you got there first. But I was
Sorry.
thinking of Min Campbell pointing into a toilet, which is the number one worst photo op I've ever seen.
What was he highlighting?
We were at a visit to an eco house. And I could tell what the snappers were doing because he was in trouble. It was a long time ago. He was in trouble as the Lib Dem leader. And I could tell all the snappers were going, Ming, Ming, over here, over here, over here. And he obligedly, it's a very decent chap, universally liked and respected in Westminster. Was a very decent chap. He went over and stood next to the eco toilet.
And then pointed into it.
and then pointed into it. And the snappers were like, never underestimate the snappers are the best journalists around. Right?
Totally.
They mischief, they knew exactly what they were doing. And he obliged. And then, of course, forevermore, you can imagine what happened next.
This reminds,
stuck in my mind, dearie me.
My version of that, and it's nothing to do with politics, was
John Swinney next to a bin.
going to an exhibition about an eco house, and there was a toilet where basically...
Oh, Adam's corpse.
Oh, look, he's gone.
It's been a long campaign.
It's been a long day. And basically incinerated what you put into the toilet. Right. And I was just like, what if you leave the seat up or you still...
Oh, dear. Well,
anyway, right.
Paddy and Laura,
I'm going
lost
to
him.
start crying with laughter and tiredness.
I think
Paddy, rescue us.
We need the wealth of experience here, please.
Would it help the whole?
Help us all.
Would it help the conversation if I just said that?
I hope so.
Ultimately, it proves.
Definitely.
No, it proves what you said in a more serious moment of the conversation, which is quite a long time ago now.
Yes.
That this is a frenetic time of campaigning.
Where emotions run high.
Yes, and nerves are ragged, and we do not criticise John Swinney for being by a plastic frog.
We do not.
He's campaigning. He wants to be spotted by voters saying vote SNP. And similarly, Ed Davies out there with his many capers, zany capers that I heard, and he has attracted, in equal measure, notice and also criticism for so doing. But the alternative is not being noticed, as I understand it, which is not a great option at an election.
And rule one of politics is name recognition. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So if you look at what's happening in the States at the moment, just to digress for a second, one of the Democrats' big problems, people haven't heard of the other potential candidates. Name recognition is like job one.
Which leads us to
for a politician,
Farage.
which leads us to Farage, but also just a sidebar on Starmer. Someone really senior in Starmer's team said to me yesterday, look, the thing is actually, even until this election, so for us boring old political hacks who've been watching this for years, we all know about Keir Starmer. We know that he's a son of a toolmaker, and we all know this, that and the other. But someone in his team was saying to me literally yesterday, look, until a couple of weeks ago, most people might have seen the odd clip of him at Prime Minister's Questions when it's just attack, shout, don't like it, politicians go away. This is the opportunity they've had in the last couple of weeks to introduce him to the country, to use their phrase. So you see him on Virgin Radio with Chris Evans with that interview that caused so much controversy. You see all these endless photo calls at every single non-league football team in the country, it appears. But this is the moment that matters, which is why it's so exciting. This is the moment when everyone watching finally has a chance to have their say. And it's not about people like us who have followed it, every tiny bit of it for years. It's about everybody in the country who's
I was
able to vote.
because I not to pat myself on the back again, but the 6-hour-long newscast, we had representatives from lots of the parties on.
Well, presumably every party that's ever been invented. You probably had the suffragette party on for 6 hours.
We actually didn't have to fill that much. There was just so much to talk about. But it's interesting because you then realise when you talk to, for example, Plaid Cymru, you're like, OK, the influence of Plaid Cymru MPs in Parliament is very, very limited. But then you realise the platform they get at election time to make us all think about, oh, actually, is it fair how transport funding is shared out between the nations when England gets a big railway and Wales doesn't? And actually, if that was debated in Parliament, unlikely to get on the news. But at an election, Plaid get to raise that quite niche concept, but they get quite a big platform to do it.
They do. And it's also when people have got to show the people who they want to vote for them in their own communities that they'll fight for them, right? I mean, forget the big picture. It makes a difference who your MP is. It makes a huge difference to many, many millions of people every single year who their MP is. And not just because of what they do in Westminster, but what they can do for you if something awful happens in your life or something difficult happens and you go and bang on their door on a Friday and you say, I'm being evicted, or I can't get these services that my kid needs because they've got special needs, or indeed you want to moan, like many people, quite understandably, about their potholes. Who you choose as your representative really, really matters in the big picture and also in the small.
And also we had the Greens on as well. And as I've said it a few times before in Newscast, but like all credit to them for just being honest about what they're trying to achieve. They're basically fighting for by-elections. They've only targeted 4 constituencies. And if they get some like big messages about the environment and social care and spending bazillions more on the NHS and having a massive carbon tax that would re-engineer the entire economy, then they get that's a bonus for them. But we'll find out when do you reckon, Laura, on Thursday night we'll get the first result? Real result?
Well, caveat, almost every constituency this year has boundary changes and we don't know what turnout will be like. So the normal kind of list of expected declaration times might be a bit more fluid. But I reckon about 11:15.
Wow, that early?
Yeah, one of the seats up in the northeast.
Sunderland.
But we'll see. Well, it might be Blyth and Ashington in Northumberland this year. But anyway, yeah, I reckon around about 11:15. But it'll probably be quite slow, a bit of a kind of trickle for that from there on in. And then once you start getting towards 2 o'clock, we just start getting bang, 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 bang. Right,
let's zoom out. And because I've realised what we've been discussing in the last 20 minutes, it's been very kind of political and quite tactical. And okay, Laura, you made your very passionate point there about the importance of your local representative.
Well, thank you.
But it is the night before an election, and everything we've talked about has seemed a little bit, almost a bit like spreadsheety or like Westminstery, and it's like we're about to have like
John Swinney in a frog bin, Mint Campbell in a toilet.
Point made. Give me a big thought. And can I start off with David Dimbleby's big thought on Newscast this morning when we were doing the Epic? He said, we're facing a really, really hard time, really, really dark days. Don't know what this country's going to do. Not holding back.
Are we going to listen to it?
No, we don't have time. That's why I paraphrased it. Yeah. Right. Who wants to go with the big thought first? The final thought first.
I said this at the weekend, so I'm not saying it for the first time. I think there are massive issues that face this country that have not featured in this campaign for more than a nanosecond. So AI, social care, kids and technology, and foreign affairs.
And to develop that point further on, whatever the outcome and however big any majority might be, a lot of those issues, massive kind of generational challenges, are not necessarily more easily resolved dependent on the size of a majority. So, we move beyond, don't we? And we've tried to punctuate, hopefully in our coverage over the last 6 weeks, that kind of reminder of reality beyond the noise and the passion and the argument and the promises and the manifestos and all the rest of it. That reminder of a backdrop that whoever wins by whatever margin will take on, and they are big, colossal challenges that will not be easily resolved.
So the opinion polls didn't really budge in 6 weeks. There was too much coverage of the opinion polls. Whoever wins, taxes are going to go up, whether it's Labour or Tory. That's going to happen already. We know that from various sources. Also, I think that the sanctity of the voting process, a big thing's happening over the channel in France. And we should not forget that this is our big moment. We're entitled to, as citizens, to make a historic choice or to make a choice to stay the same. But it should not be underestimated. We should not be part of the system that says it's all the same. It's less than 100 years ago we had universal suffrage. 1928 women were given the same rights as men. Don't allow yourself to be cynical about it. This is a fork in the road moment, and on Friday morning we'll know a bit more about who we all are based on how we all acted with our little private cross. It's a humbling moment.
Yeah, it's amazing. I also just wonder if we sometimes don't have enough imagination about things that happen. And when you look back at the 1906 election, and I'm always very wary of these historical parallels. It's like, all right, well, they didn't have phones in 1906, did they? It's kind of different world. But it's things like political parties come and go, and things that can seem very stable and very permanent one day actually can disappear. And the thing that makes them disappear, Paddy, is people making decisions.
And also people are voters are volatile now, right? So people will say, 2019, lots of sage. People went, aha, well, this means the Tories are going to be in power forever. Another term, they've got this huge majority of 80 or 81, depending who you count. And of course, actually, the world isn't like that anymore. There was a period of real political stability in this country in this sort of mid-century, I suppose, where, yes, if somebody got a majority of 80, you would have quite understandably assumed that they could have had 2 terms and a go at it. If what we expect to happen is even vaguely what does turn out to happen, the notion of that volatility has been completely smashed to bits. But I will give you my pompous line, which I was preparing to use at another point of broadcasting at some point, or if it turns out as we expect, the volatility of the electorate has absolutely been Keir Starmer's friend. It was why he believed he would be able to turn this round in one term, if indeed that does happen. If he wins and he walks to Downing Street, on Friday, July the 5th and forward, that volatility might well turn out to be his next enemy, because voters change all the time. And when people talk about, they're Labour voters or they're Tory voters or they're UKIP voters or no, they're not. They're voters. And good politicians, I think, respect that and understand that and try to meet them where they are, rather than thinking, these are people that I own and I'm going to be terribly surprised when this constituency slips away from me. Anyway, that's more than...
Well, my version of that is, I remember when I was on Newsround being in Washington the night Obama won the election in 2008, and it taught me the most important lesson about elections. Elections just get you into power. That's kind of it. Then staying in power and governing, as you were just saying, is a totally different ballgame. And you look at Obama and you think about the hope, the joy, the expectation, how different he was, just embodied in that man. And then after day one in office, all that stuff didn't really matter anymore because it became about decisions and governing.
And you know what? One more little thing beyond the politics, the big P politics of tomorrow and Friday, the kind of civic society, the expression of civic society that tomorrow itself is all about. I was looking at some of these numbers. 40,000 polling stations open for 15 hours, run by around 150,000 people, and then the tens of thousands who are involved in the sifting and the counting overnight. Just that as a collective enterprise of society to do the thing of coming out with the expression of what the country collectively says, which is just quite something, really. And again, it's something we take for granted until you look at the nuts and bolts of it and then remember around the world where this sort of right does not exist. And you think, wow, it's quite a thing, isn't it?
And you went from the plastic frog to that. It's like a Christmas cracker joke to the Gettysburg Address in the scope of one podcast.
It was worth waiting for.
Yes, totally. Right. That's it for Newscast for this election campaign in 2024, unless we have another election in 2024.
Who knows? You see, who knows?
It's not unprecedented.
Who knows?
Not another one.
With sincere apologies to Brenda from Bristol, I think we should call it a day.
Yeah. Oh, just to say, though, voting on Thursday, remember to take your ID, because that's the big change. You need to have photo ID, but it doesn't have to necessarily be a driving license or a passport. There's lots of different forms of ID you can take. And the other thing is, even if you're still in the queue at 10 o'clock when the polls close, they still let you put your vote in the ballot box. But you have to be there. at 10 o'clock. You can't turn up at 10:05. They won't let you in.
Then you should be watching the telly by then anyway.
And Laura, you're on BBC One, what,
9:55?
9:55?
Yeah, 5
And
to
then
10.
the exit poll drops at 1 second past 10.
10, bang on.
And then you have to
Yeah.
come up with the,
Listen to the bongs.
yeah.
And then bang it out.
And then do you turn to Chris and go, Chris?
I'm going to give it away. Put the telly on tomorrow and then you'll find out.
Okay, it's tradition. It's tradition. And then you can also listen to the coverage on Radio 4 and 5 Live. They're doing a joint collab. And the Newsnight, they'll be doing it as well. And the Newscast all-nighter is happening in the BBC Radio Theatre with me and 150 other fellow political geeks, I mean that in the nicest way, watching all the results coming in. And then, Paddy, you can own the weekend.
We'll wrap it up, but I think it does sound like goodbye, and I'm pleased. Congratulations on your 6 hour.
Thank you.
Chris and Laura, we look forward to that moment at 10 when we see you predict our future.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.